This is a response to Professor Anton's video. I think it's called something like Irony is Nothing, Corey, or it might be called Nothing is Irony. Either way, irony and nothing. Really interesting video again. So I just thought I'd kind of revisit it in my own terms to see if I can flesh it out a bit better for myself, really. And for me, obviously there's two parts to it. There's the idea of irony and there's the idea of nothing. And then what happens when you put them together, at least that's what I'm thinking. So let me just think through this idea of irony. When you're talking about it, Corey, I think quite rightly you use that example of comic irony that you find in the satire, particularly of the Onion, which is a really great source of satire and the kind of comic ironic effects that you talk about. But there's other kinds of irony, which I know you know about, but all of them really rely on the concept of conceptual distance, sometimes called ironic distance, conceptual distance. Let me just see if I can flesh that out with a couple of other examples. I mean, the simplest example from my perspective, obviously given my job, is dramatic irony that you find in theatre or in films and TV shows even. And dramatic irony is the set of effects that you get because the audience knows things that are happening that the characters in the play or the characters in the movie or TV show don't know. The audience, because it's separated, there's some literal distance, you know, they're over there and you're over here, literal distance, but also kind of imaginary distance, conceptual distance, that you have, as a member of the audience, you have an oversight on the whole play. You've seen things happen that individual characters haven't seen. You have access to special knowledge because of that distance. Dramatic irony. And a classic example is probably Oedipus Rex, which is a piece of Greek literature and a play. I think it's Sophocles. Anyway, the story of Oedipus is pretty well known. You know, this guy, there's a what's it called? A prediction that this guy is going to kill his father and marry his mother. That's the prediction that's made by the fortune teller. So the guy wanders around the globe. He's sent out of the city, wanders around, and you follow him for a while. And then after he's wandered, he meets this man on the road, and they get into some kind of an altercation. And it ends up in a fight, and Oedipus ends up killing this chap. And then Oedipus goes into the nearest city, meets this woman there, falls in love, marries her. And of course, all the time you're watching these events, the killing and the marriage, you know damn well that that's his dad that he's just killed, and you know damn well that's his mother that he's just married. But Oedipus doesn't know that. He doesn't know that the prediction has come true. And the fact that you know it and he doesn't gives rise to these ironic effects, these dramatic irony effects. And that's different to the kind of effects you get in other kinds of experiences. You know, like action movies, for example, have usually got very little dramatic irony in them. You know, typically in an action movie, you will follow the lead character or the lead couple of characters through their various adventures, and the things that happen to them, you know, the explosions that they just managed to avoid, or the girls that they managed to seduce, or all the kind of things that happen in those movies, you'd find out about them pretty much at the same time as they do, and all of the effects of the movie are driven by that kind of surprise and kind of narrative push, really. But that's very different to dramatic irony. Dramatic irony, as I say, is when you know something that the characters don't. Just try to think of a second example. There used to be a TV show called Columbo. I'm sure it's on the States, American show. American detective series called Columbo, which I really used to like. I think it's probably 70s, maybe something like that. And it featured the lead character, the detective, Columbo. Was this really kind of shambolic character. He always used to wear this dirty raincoat, and one of his eyes didn't seem to work properly, and he was always kind of eating stuff and dribbling food down his front. You know, it's a big mess, really. And typically the murderer, because it was always murders, you always knew about it before. You always knew at the beginning of the show who the murderer was, pretty much. It wasn't one of those. It didn't rely on the surprise ending where the murderer appears. You knew who the murderer was usually, and so the whole thing was about the gradual revelation of the gradual discovery of that, and what Joe Columbo's processes were. But the dramatic irony effect, I think, came in because you, as the viewer, knew that Columbo was a really smart guy, really, and they had a history of solving almost impossible to solve murders, and that all this whole kind of shambolic appearance was really deceptive. You knew that, but typically the murderer didn't know that, and so you get these suave murderers in these shows, being really patronising and to Columbo, and all the time you as an audience thinking, yeah, but he's going to nail your ass to the wall by the end of this series, by the end of this episode. So, and that was part of the pleasure, that was part of the dramatic, ironic effect. And as I say, that's down to distance. You as a viewer, separate from the appearance on the screen, are given special privileges, special rights. You've seen the murder happen, you've seen, you have this kind of special viewpoint which allows you not just to look through one person's eyes but to have an overview of the whole thing, and that distance is what provides the irony. Same thing with comic irony, the example you give, Corey. The Onion episode is really funny, you know what I mean, but that only works, I think, because we have a distance on it. We can step back from that kind of episode in which and we can see it in the context of other kinds of things. There's all those other news items in which certain subgroups of students are felt to be prejudiced against by an unfair educational system. We've all seen those items on Fox News or on Sky News or on the BBC or whatever, and there's always this kind of slightly urgent tone about it, and terribly caring tone about it, that the Onion simulates terribly well. And so one of the effects of the one of the ways that piece is working, I think, is because again you've got distance on it. You're not caught up in the news item. You're not watching it as news. You're 2 steps back, so you can see that as a news item in the context of other news items, real news items, which are saying the same kinds of things, and lots of other information that you've got access to. So again, it's reliant on that kind of distance, and and the comic effect is produced because of this kind of disparity and the strange kind of juxtapositions that happen with that piece and the other pieces and the real pieces which it simulates. But again, that's only possible because of ironic distance. God, that was a lot. Yeah, in this weird way, science is kind of ironic, not because it raises its eyebrow, or because it's reminiscent of that Shania Twain, that song, Isn't It Ironic? Whatever. It's a song in which none of the examples she gives are actually examples of irony. But science is kind of ironic in that sense, in that it allows a bit of distance. You're not caught up in the activity, so your subjectivity isn't bound to the activity you're doing. You're back a bit, so you can see the activity in relation to lots of other actions, and that gives you it's not usually referred to as an ironic distance, but that's kind of what it is. A lot of postmodern art was ironic. Yeah. If you looked at art in like the 1980s, a lot of Western art in the 1980s, typically it looked terribly self-conscious, and it always seemed to be quoting itself and quoting other artists, and in fact, people used to say at the time, you had to have the irony built in. You had to build the irony into the art. You had to reference all of its surroundings, so you felt as if you were distanced from it. At the same, in order to be able to appreciate it, it couldn't be serious. People say that stopped after 9/11, but I don't know why that would be the case. People suddenly started getting authentic again, didn't they, after 9/11? Anyway, ironic. Yeah, and so nothing is irony. Irony is nothing. Let's look at that other bit then. Irony is nothing. If irony is about having distance, if irony is about separating yourself in order to be able to get an overview, then what does it mean to say that irony is nothing or nothing is irony? I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. I think, bearing in mind that nothing doesn't exist, I don't think. It's a concept. There's no such thing as nothing in my view. Why would we invent a concept like nothingness? And how does it feature within irony? One way I think would be to conceptualize nothing as the space in which one can kind of conceptually retreat in order to be able to get an overview on everything, because I imagine the opposite of everything is nothing. So in order to be ironically separated from everything, to try to gain that kind of God's eye view on everything, you would have to retreat into a space which is not everything, and which is its opposite, which is nothing. So that would be one way of conceiving it. So you get an ironic distance on the everythingness. That would be one way of doing it. The other thing would be to imagine a kind of third space. So you imagine everything. So to conceive of everything, you would have to step back and imagine it in the context of nothing. So you see everything and nothing together. And and in order to be able to see everything contrasted with nothing, you would have to step into a conceptual third space, which gives you that oversight. Why is there something rather than nothing? In order to say that, you have to be in a place where you can almost imaginatively see something, compare it to nothing, and think, yes, well, why is it this rather than this? So there's again a kind of ironic separation. Only possible, I guess, or at least only possible to be articulated through language, but I don't know, maybe it exists outside of language. Yeah, okay, that's it. That's all I can say on that. Irony is nothing, nothing is irony.